Hello everybody, welcome to Artisan X, a resource hub for the developers of X-Plane aircraft. If you're looking for information and resources regarding X-Plane aircraft development, you are in the right place. In this video, we begin at the beginning. Module 1, Overview and Core Concepts. Since this is the very first video in this series, let's start with a brief overview of what Artisan X is. Artisan X is my way of giving something back to the X-Plane developer community. Over the last 5 years, I have transitioned from being a novice developer into being able to produce payroll quality aircraft for X-Plane. This road was not easy, as information and online resources for what you need to know, often scattered at best, missing, or out of date. Artisan X is intended to be a curated resource hub for both new and veteran developers. Before we start this module, let's look at an overview of the first set of Artisan X resource videos. The high-level overview of the series is as follows: core concepts, research and conceptualization, resource planning, development and production, marketing and product launch. We will look at each of these areas in some depth over the coming videos. What are core concepts? It's what you need to know what you need to know. Aircraft development, like any game asset development, is much more complicated than it would seem to be to the average gamer or simmer. I have often seen comments in forums saying, "How do I add X to my airplane?" Of course, the answer to that question is what this course is all about. The core concepts we're going to look at include a business plan, what skill sets are required, what exactly is an X-Plane aircraft, and what tools do you need, and what tools do you need in your toolbox to develop flight simulation aircraft. So, I can already hear you saying, really? A business plan? Well, the answer really is yes. Developing X-Plane aircraft is extremely resource intensive in terms of your time and your money. Some software is free, but hardware and some programs cost real money. You will also spend hundreds of hours completing a project. So you really should take time to write a 1 or 2 page document defining your goals and what you plan to invest in order to achieve them. This will not only help you focus on what you need to do, but also help you track and celebrate the progress you are making. If this seems too much for you, then you probably are not ready to commit to developing an aircraft. Next, let's take a look at the skill sets you'll need in aircraft development. Again, these may seem to be overkill, but I promise you, if you don't analyze and grow your competency in these traits, you will not make it through the end of the process. Patience. Everything in aircraft development takes longer than you think it will. You need to be patient with the process. You need to be organized. There are many moving parts in developing an aircraft, and keeping them all in the right order and all of the different versions for all of the different platforms you're developing for takes a lot of organizational effort. Invest in organizing yourself before you start. Then you need to be methodical. Focus on one step at a time. Lose focus on what you're doing, and suddenly all that organizational effort will seem to have gone to waste. Keep track of what you're doing. Keep focused on what you're doing. Next, we need to be inquisitive. Don't start modeling something you don't fully understand. Use the resources that you have developed and find new ones if you need to. Make sure you fully understand what you're modeling before you begin. This will greatly shorten the time it takes for you to get to the final product. Finally, it helps to have an artistic eye. Everything that you do should look, sound, and feel like it belongs together. Developing these skill sets is like training for a marathon. They don't get to the finish line, but they'll help you get there faster when you're ready to start the race. And now, on to the part of this module you're probably expecting to see. The tool sets that are required, or as I like to call them, your toy box. What toys do you need in your toy box? We'll cover them in 3 basic areas. You need a decent computer, what peripherals do you need, and what software is needed to develop X-Plane aircraft. While you can make almost any system work, the reality is that you need a decently spec computer to avoid a lot of pain and frustration. So what is a decent computer? Let's take a look at the core components. The good news is that you can develop on the platform you want to. Windows, Linux, and Mac all support X-Plane. The bad news is that you have to develop for all three platforms if you want a full package. It still makes sense to develop on the platform you are most comfortable with. Porting these to the other platforms is a much easier process than the creation process. So what do we mean by a decently spec computer? Well, the answer to that question will change over time. My suggestion is to keep within 2 to 3 generations of the latest releases. That'll give you enough horsepower to get the job done. A lot of the software we're using leverages multiple cores and higher-end graphics card processing abilities. The number of cores, RAM, and video memory you have will have a direct impact on how fast the software we use renders your solutions each step of the way. Next, don't underestimate the need for a high DPI mouse with a scroll wheel. There are a lot of fine movements are made during the process of developing an aircraft, and you need this control in order to get the job done. Because of the high detail we're working in, I would recommend at least one 4K monitor and multiple monitors if you can afford it. This gives you the workspace you need to be able to look at resources while you're creating your content. You will also need a good quality set of speakers and or headphones in order to ensure that the sounds you want to have go with your airplane are accurately representative in the final model. Finally, let's talk about 2 areas that are often ignored. You need an ergonomically sound workspace. You'll spend many hours sitting at your desk, so it's important to have the correct posture and everything being in the correct level of reach to avoid any repetitive strains. This is a long, strenuous journey. You need to invest in the right equipment and tools to get there. And finally, there's nothing more important than having an active and robust backup plan. I recommend following the 3-2-1 backup plan, which says you don't have a copy of your project unless you have 3 copies of your project on 2 different medium, and one of them needs to be off-site. It seems like overkill sometimes, but if you lose 100 hours worth of work, it suddenly becomes a real thing. When it comes to the peripherals you'll need, while it would be nice to have a full-blown home cockpit, you don't need one to develop aircraft, but you do need a few basic tools. A good yoke or joystick is a good starting point. I would also recommend getting rudder pedals. You really need to be able to test the airplane's performances piece by piece using these basic controls. I also would recommend getting a throttle quadrant for the same reason. Having the right controls really will help you put your plane to the test to make sure it is performing like a real airplane. And finally, once again, a good pair of headphones will help you test to make sure all the sounds you put into your aircraft make sense when you're actively flying the airplane. So now we have the skill sets and hardware we need, but let's take a look at what an X-Plane aircraft really is made of. There are 5 main parts to the aircraft add-on. 1 is the model you'll build in X-Plane's Plane Maker. This is a 3D model used to determine flight characteristics, the performance specifications, and the instruments that you'll be using on your aircraft. Next is the model you see, the .obj object model that you will see in the flight simulator as a final product. This includes all the animations of propellers spinning, flaps moving, and all the other animations that you need to make the plane come to life. Literally painted on top of that model are the liveries that you will put onto the aircraft to give it the color and depth and textures that you intend to have in your final product. Next, there are the computer-coded plugins that will make the dial spin and the doors open or whatever else you need to do. A lot of this is built into X-Plane, but every aircraft needs some custom coding to make it perform like the real-world aircraft you are modeling after. And finally, speaking of the real aircraft, all sounds should be custom recorded and made specifically for your airplane and not the default sounds included in X-Plane. This is a real standout area for anybody who flies any amount of aircraft. In the last section of this module, we'll take a look at the software you need to develop an aircraft in X-Plane. The tools we cover will be my primary choice for each of the types of software we look at. We will look at some popular alternatives in future modules. But for now, this will give you an idea of the kinds of tools you will need to have in your toolkit when we're talking about the bits and bytes we need to create the aircraft. The first piece of software is no surprise, X-Plane. Not only do we need X-Plane itself to test and fly our aircraft, but we also need the plane maker that is associated with that version of X-Plane. It comes with X-Plane when you purchase it. PlaneMaker has components for almost every system you won't see in the final product, but are extremely important to making the plane look and behave the way it should. Inside PlaneMaker, you build a model that will be used to create the flight physics of the aircraft. This looks sort of like the real plane, but won't have any of the details that are in the final product. X-Plane uses this model to determine the lift, drag, and other performance characteristics of the body of the airplane. Added to this are pages full of information such as engine specifications, electrical systems, the propeller size, the wheels. All of the different components are described in charts and numbers that help determine the final performance and behaviors of the aircraft you are developing. We will look at all of these different parts of the PlaneMaker in a future module. I will note, X-Plane requires a separate license for each platform you are developing on. Next, we'll look at my weapon of choice for 3D modeling, Blender. While free, Blender is also a powerful 3D modeling tool with a lot of features and add-ons you'd find in products costing thousands of dollars. With Blender, we'll actually be developing two different models of the airplane. One is the outside of the airplane looking in, and the second one is the inside of the airplane, or the cockpit area, looking out. Depending whether you're inside or outside of the airplane, one or both of the models may be present in your view. We will also look at the free and paid add-ons for Blender, which makes the program much more useful in developing aircraft. These add-ons help you design your plane and then also create the files needed to export your plane into other programs, which will allow the final product to be imported back into X-Plane. We'll cover these in greater depth in later modules. Next on our list is Adobe Substance Painter. It's more than a paint program. As the name says, it's also a substance program. It provides fully detailed texture information, including normal maps, which add 3D-like textures without the cost of modeling them, the level of metallic sheen of each object, and the luminance of the parts of the object, such as the text on instruments, dials, and switches. In short, 3D painting brings an object to life. It no longer looks like a cartoon, but an actual model of a real-world object. While Substance Painter is not free, I will cover how to use it at a reasonable cost. We will also look at some free alternatives when we get to the module covering 3D painting. There are already some excellent tutorials on how to use Substance Painter on YouTube and other channels, and we will refer to those for some basic operations. Here, we'll cover how to integrate Substance Painter into the X-Plane development environment. The final product we'll cover today is 2D painting software, and here we'll focus on GIMP, a free open source paint program that will provide all the tools and utilities you need to make excellent quality 2D assets. Those who have Adobe Painter certainly can use that. It's used in the industry quite often. We can use GIMP to create 2D assets in 3D models such as display surfaces and dials, and also to augment some details onto the 3D model created in Substance Painter. There's a lot of work between GIMP and Substance Painter when it comes to getting to the final product of the texture set we'll use on our models. In a future module, we'll also take a deep dive into the world of coding for X-Plane. The language of choice here is C++, using the X-Plane Software Development Kit SDK provided for all platforms. Each platform has a lot of commonalities where you can use the same coding on each of the platforms, while certain items such as graphics will require some custom coding for each of the different platforms. Similar to some of the other applications we looked at, the goal here will be not to teach you how to code in C++, but how to code in an X-Plane environment in a way that makes sense and hopefully saves you a lot of time and frustration trying to figure out some of the peculiarities of the X-Plane system. There are a number of other programs, which we will not cover today, that are needed to complete your X-Plane package. One example of these software packages is the Fmod sound package, which puts all of your sounds into the 3D space surrounding the airplane. We'll cover it in detail when the time comes. This completes Module 1 of the series, an overview and core concepts in X-Plane development. There was a lot to cover, and it may seem overwhelming when you put it all in one place like this. However, if you take it one piece at a time, you can get through it. Or you can look to join a team and focus on one area that interests you in particular and let other people worry about the other parts of the development cycle. The choice is yours. The purpose of this tutorial was to provide a general overview of the entire development process from start to finish and all the details and all of the work that takes to just put something onto an airplane. Thank you for taking the time to make it to the end of this module. If you are interested in leaving a comment or seeing more information about this, please check out the Artisan X website, which is found on artisansimulation.com, and then click on the link for Artisan X. If you would like to do something to pay me back while I pay back the developer community who helped me get to where I am, please consider purchasing an airplane from artisansimulation.com. Thank you for your time and attention for this. We'll see you in the next module.